So colleagues, let me start by thanking all of you for joining us here today. Good morning and Assalamu alaikum. I think we do have some colleagues from both public and private sector joining us in a while, but just in the interest of time, we sort of would like to start this on time. On behalf of Team SDPI, I of course welcome you to this online meeting on expediting trade facilitation reforms for manufacturing sector amid COVID-19. This dialogue, as most of you know, is part of SDPI's Strengthening the Use of Evidence for Development Impact program, in which we are also collaborating with Ministry of Industries and Ministry of Commerce, for which we are very grateful. Just to give you a background, that this public-private dialogue has started in the backdrop of COVID-19, and while the previous 4 dialogues, public-private dialogues, focused on taxation and credit issues faced by exporters amid COVID-19. Today, of course, we would like to discuss how trade facilitation reforms, particularly a drive towards digital transformation in trade space, could lead to better outcomes for our exporters. We will also review and discuss the ongoing trade facilitation projects in Pakistan, in which I think all of our esteemed panelists today, they are involved in some capacity or the other, and we would like to hear from them, as well as from the private sector, on how they wish to see digital transformation in the trade facilitation space, as well as the ambition of going paperless to the extent possible. So just some housekeeping announcements that for a wider dissemination and for information of our stakeholders, we usually record these sessions. And if all of our panelists would be comfortable, we would place it on the SDPI's YouTube channel, of course, subject to your comfort. Speakers are, of course, encouraged to, of course, interact with each other as well. We want to keep it as interactive as possible. There will be, of course, an initial time which will be given to our esteemed speakers, 10 minutes each, in which they can elaborate their initial views on the subject. And we are inviting some guests from the private sector, stakeholders, some government colleagues, including the civil service institutes like PETAD, in case they would like to pose any questions. And questions for our panelists would come through the chat box, which is there in front of you. And of course, our moderator will help to identify and direct those questions. I'm personally grateful to all the esteemed panelists who have joined us today. Their detailed introduction would be done by our moderator. But really grateful to Dr. Manzoor Ahmed Saab, former ambassador to WTO, Dr. Salamat Ali, of course, a former FBR and now a very senior trade economist with Commonwealth Secretariat, Ms. Faiza, of course, with Pakistan-Afghanistan Joint Chamber of Commerce as Secretary General, and of course, Riaz Ahmed Sheikh Saab. I'm grateful to him that he was able to join and represent Trade Development Authority of Pakistan. He's, of course, leading the trade facilitation agenda in his capacity as Director General, and of course, a very renowned and senior civil servant. Our moderator for today is Mr. Munib Sikandar, who's an alumnus of London School of Economics. He's an economist, he's an SME expert in the space. He has worked with Rainmaker Consulting in London. He's worked with Samida. He's recently developed an affiliation with SDPI, and this will be, of course, his first interaction in this capacity as a moderator. But of course, he has continued to help other actors in the government in conducting in-depth SME-focused research. He has numerous publications to his name, including the in-depth study around SME knowledge satisfaction, access to formal financing, and how SMEs are responding to COVID-19. In addition to his research duties, he was active in the project management aspects of NBDB at Samida. So really happy for all of you to join over here. I will now request Munib to take over as moderator and take forward the proceedings. Thank you. panelists. Over to you, Munib.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction, Bakar. First of all, I am absolutely delighted that we have collaborated in bringing this webinar to the public. Especially, I think, at the start, you kind of said that the events that are happening right now are on the backdrop of COVID-19. And I think one of the most important things to kind of realize is my own journey towards finding out more about trade, or whether it was business development or SME facilitation, whatever it was. It all kind of started with the quote from Albert Camus and reading the novel The Plague very early on when the COVID crisis started. Because, you know, I think when the kind of lockdown happened, all of us can kind of agree to the fact that things were very uncertain. We didn't know what to do. And here Camus says in The Plague, I know that man is capable of great deeds, but if he isn't capable of great emotion, well, he leaves me cold. And I think when all the kind of rational ways of thinking about the world flip over, as they have in the backdrop of the COVID crisis, one kind of needs one kind of doesn't need, one has to experiment with a number of different new techniques. That's the only kind of option left. Here, for me personally, the ideas of a former professor, Dr. Christian Busch, who recently published a book called The Serendipity Mindset. He hasn't paid me for any advertising, but I would really encourage you to buy this book. One of the quotes that he read was, that I read from his book, our reaction to the unexpected defines who we are. What can you do to seize the opportunities that emerge, even in the darkest moments of crisis? And this whole idea, once again, kind of led me through a number of different avenues and all the way up to trade facilitation, which I thought was a very, very, very interesting subject. But unfortunately, trade policy, trade economics isn't really thought much in whether it was the London School of Economics or maybe Salamat Saab would agree, since he himself did a master's over there, or pretty much in any kind of economic university. And I thought, you know, the best way for me to kind of learn this in the context of Pakistan would be to somehow get 4 leading experts from the public and private sector on a common platform where I can just, you know, listen and listen to a lecture just as I did at uni. So yeah, I really, really do thank you for that, Bakar, and I do thank you, all the esteemed guests, whether it's Dr. Salamat, Dr. Manzoor, 2 leading experts in this field. Riyaz Sheikh Saab, of course, who is in a critical and very important role as DG Facilitation at the Trade Development Authority of Pakistan, and Mrs. Faiza, of course, who represents the private sector in a very kind of comprehensive way in her professional capacity as General Secretary of the All Pakistan Afghanistan Trade Chamber of Commerce, I believe. Sorry, I might have got that wrong. With that, I will move on to our first guest, Dr. Salamat Ali, who will kind of start and lead the conversation and set the agenda. Dr. Salamat Ali is an international trade economist with more than 15 years of professional experience. He was the lead author of the Commonwealth Secretariat's first ever flagship report. This report was presented on the topic of international trade in 2015 to all the heads of states. Currently, he has been very active in leading the implementation of the World Trade Organization's trade facilitation agreement within Pakistan, and he has been a pivotal figure when it comes to the development of the Pakistan single window. His work over here has involved conducting an IT infrastructure assessment of 44 different government agencies, and is currently supervising the re-engineering of their business processes, as well as developing an e-commerce framework for Pakistan. Before I give the floor over to you, Dr. Salamat, I would hats off to you, sir, because it's often very difficult to get 2 departments within the same government institution to work. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to kind of you sharing your experiences in this matter. Over to you, Dr. Salamat.
Thanks, Munib, for the generous introduction, and thanks, Bakar and team, for connecting us together and enabling me to talk on this topic, which is very close to my heart. I would like to start with one thing before I move on. Let me correct, because I have moved on from the FBR and now I have taken up my new role in Commonwealth Secretary as Trade Advisor. And I am also looking after our Geneva office and working as a Trade Facilitation Advisor for Commonwealth Small States in Geneva. I'd like to give you the global picture of trade policy and trade facilitation in the wake of COVID, and discuss how countries are introducing new trade measures and how trade policy is shaping up in this challenging time. So let me share my screen with you, so give you some statistics and some thoughts. All right, so as I mentioned, I will be focusing on these three topics: trade policy and trade facilitation and the role of digital technologies. And then if we have time, so I can talk about some of my experiences on trade facilitation in Pakistan. So let's get started with the trade policy. So all of us know that this COVID-19 is unprecedented. Unprecedented in terms of its timing, unprecedented in terms of its scale, and unprecedented in terms of nature, the way it's unfolding. So we have also seen quite unprecedented trade policy challenges in this period. So there's a big combination of trade facilitation measures as well as trade restriction measures. So some countries have cut tariffs and allowed concessionary imports of food supplies, medical supplies, and essential goods. But we also have a range of countries which have imposed export bans, they have introduced quotas, and they have moved back to protectionism in the garb of health and safety grounds. But there is wide recognition at the WTO and other organizations, WCO, World Bank, IMF, that it is important to keep trade flowing open. So what this pandemic has taught us, that no country is self-sufficient. So we depend upon each other for safety and for food, in addition to other manufacturers and other stuff. So if you see the pandemic unfolded in China and then traveled toward Europe and finally America, and now Africa is bearing its brunt. So when China had this virus, so they imported medical supplies and food from the West. But gradually, when this pandemic moved to the West, and then Western countries and Asian economies imported medical supplies, masks, ventilators from China. So this is very much interconnected world. So no country is self-sufficient. Then we see that there is a monopoly of production of ventilation equipment, medical supplies. So I will get into that. This is very different world now, and most likely the people say we are in the new normal. So there has been some development on the food policy also. Some countries which are net food importers, so they have been in big crush due to this food crisis, and I think World Food Program has indicated 25 countries which are hotspot of hunger because of this COVID. Then there are challenges around industrial and agricultural inputs. I'm sure some of our colleagues have seen the challenges raised by auto manufacturers, so there are shortage of parts. Apple also raised concern about the shortage of semiconductors, and some countries have shortage of food imports. So these restrictions, export bans, and quotas have created challenges in many parts of the world. But now the debate is shifting toward the role of trade in recovery and resilience building. So that's very good. And also the vaccine internationalism. There is a wider discussion that the new vaccine which different companies are manufacturing, so that could be declared as a public good. So each country, LDCs, small states, island states, and the countries which can't afford it, they should be given access to the vaccine. And trade policy has a big role here. Now let me move to the core of our discussion today, that is trade facilitation. It's part of the bigger trade policy. So it looks like the trade facilitation agreement, which was signed in 2013, basically it was created for this kind of challenging time. Because now The paper and boxes and documents are also considered to be one of the mechanisms of transmission of virus. What we have seen overall in the world, there's a big movement to the optimization of border procedures and big shift toward digital technologies and acceptance of electronic documents. So the countries which I work with is mainly the 33 small states. We provide support to them on trade facilitation. Some of these countries, for instance, South Africa and St. Kitts, Jamaica, they have introduced green lanes for the supply of medical goods and for the supply of foodstuff and other essential items. And there is also big discussion toward the border agency cooperation, especially cooperation with your next door neighbors in terms of timing of customs operations, in terms of sharing of documents, in terms of sharing of information. One new thing which we have seen, which we never heard of, that some countries have designated customs workers and functionaries as essential frontline workers. For instance, Brazil has provided around 1.6 million masks and PPEs to the customs official to keep their ports and airports operational. And they want their port operational to the round the clock so that there are less people on the port and they can maintain more social distancing. So health and safety of custom officials and trade officials has emerged as a big issue, and countries are handling it in different ways. So as Waqar has mentioned in the beginning, the facilitation of exporters, that is also in highlight nowadays, and most of the agencies recommend that government should delay the payment of duty taxes and fines and give them extra time, and also give them concession on the payment of VAT so that they are not facing the liquidity crunch. Also, these are some silver lining, but there are also some countries I have seen in Madagascar, in Kenya, Tanzania, the countries which rely more on import revenues as Pakistan does, so they actually increase physical examination of goods. So they want to generate more revenue from these import operations. That's unfortunate because these goods are delaying at ports when countries need them the most. But overall, there's a big shift toward digital technologies and acceptance of electronic documents. Even countries like UK, Canada, and South Korea, they allowed traders to file their documents through email. If you can't access web because there's a lot of pressure on digital broadband nowadays, so you can simply email your form to the authorities and they will process them. And I actually personally availed that facility when I moved to the UK from Pakistan, and I filed all my baggage claim and documents through email to UK Customs and got clearance online. And moving on, countries are using advanced risk management system, so it can expedite clearance of essential goods, food, medical supplies, ventilators, oxygen therapy equipment. So these kind of goods have been declared as green goods. They should be able to cross borders. So we all know that a risk management system is part of trade facilitation agreement, but countries take it as a bottom line and they are doing much beyond those minimum requirements. And technology is helping us to keep our ports and seaports and goods moving. And the main discussion nowadays that if you want to trade to flow, so we need to increase the broadband, especially increase the broadband access to the areas which don't have that, especially in the countries, in small states, islands, and neglected part of the country which don't have access to broadband. So we need to provide that access so that countries settle in this new normal. But we all know that technology has its own limitations. It is allowing us to do trade in goods in some respects, but trade in services, which is also a big component of international trade, around 25% trade is in services. So they also got big hit during this recession. The goods trade is expected to drop by 15 to 20%, but services got hit of around 50%.
Sorry, just to interrupt you just to, I hope you don't mind, Dr. Slamet, but as a moderator, I have to ensure that you keep it within the 10 to 13 minute time frame. I'm really sorry, sir. I'm very, very interested. If you can just kind of keep it a little bit brief, and then we can kind of give you a little bit more time towards the end, because we're already getting quite a lot of questions.
Well, I will take 2 more minutes and move on. Thank you. Right.
Thank you, sir.
We go to the multilateral response to what's going on in this world. So most of the organizations are still scanning this horizon because this is quite uncertain and unfolding environment. But there are concern about transparency of trade policies because countries have not reported most of the measures. And this new thing which we see, sicken thy neighbor, a race to bottom. So WTO wants to avoid countries to do these kind of things. And there is a discussion about implementation of category C measures because they are dependent on the technical and financial assistance from donors. And donors are also facing a lot of financial issues and GDP recession. So there is a concern that some countries might not be able to implement these measures in time. So these are few recommendations about the trade policy and trade facilitation. So these are mainly the same things. International institutions want countries to suspend tariffs, give refund of VAT, avoid export restrictions, and on the trade facilitation front, they want countries to move toward web-based system and allow flexible timings. And one last thing which we have seen in this pandemic is switch to high-frequency data. Because now the UNCTAD is collecting real-time container movement data from ports to see how trade is affecting. We are in the month of September, now we can actually see the data of month of August 2020. So thanks, Murray, very much. So let's move on and we can have discussion on Pakistan's aspect later.
Thank you very much for your thoughts, sir. Fascinating stuff. I think being in a position of having navigated quite an extensive amount of the Pakistan Single Window project, as well as with a number of various Commonwealth countries, it was fascinating to hear and for you to share your thoughts and set the agenda. I'd next like to invite Dr. Manzoor Ahmed. Dr. Manzoor Ahmed Sab, we've already had a short chat with you before this, but just to introduce Dr. Manzoor. Dr. Manzoor Sab is the Chief Executive of the World Trade Advisors. He is a Senior Fellow at the ICTSD, as well as previously from 2002 to 2008, he had served as Pakistan's ambassador to the World Trade Organization. I think he kind of quoted just a very, very small quote from his most recent article, really struck a chord with me, which was, if only 2 practices in Pakistan's export regime are brought on par with other countries, almost 2/3 of domestic barriers would be reformed. These are export inspection and tax refund procedures. Dr. Manzoor Sab, with that, I was just actually talking to my Mamu, Dr. Ikram, earlier today, who is in the audience, and he shared a picture of you, him, and the current IMF resident chief with me, and I thought that was, you know, it was fascinating to kind of him sharing the experiences that you had at the time. With that, sir, I give the floor over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Muneeb. Good morning. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. First, I'm very pleased to connect with this group of people. You know, I'm now and then in touch with Wakar, but somehow lost touch with Salamat Ali and others, and I'm very pleased with it. Okay, so basically, in the next 10 minutes or so, 3 points that I'd like to cover. First, I should say that, you know, some of the points that I had in my presentation, I did some research and fortunately, Salamat has covered them very well. So I'll skip them because they're already done and he's on top of things. Second, I would like to give a little bit of over picture. You know, I know about COVID and everything, but just to put the things in context and about our trade and trade policy. And then I'll focus on a little bit on the 3 points that moderators have asked me to focus, maybe 2 points out of those. First, you know, one of the, Pakistan, everyone knows, is going through this serious economic difficulties. And I think one of the key reasons is our poor performance in international trade. We are, maybe in the last 30 years, we are one of the worst performers. But if you just look at the last 15 years and look at our neighbors, say India, Bangladesh, China, all of them have built up on their international trade share by another 100 to 150%. Whereas Pakistan has lost its meager share that it had by about a quarter, by 25%. So we are, we are in a very bad shape. Had we just kept up with the region, with the SAARC region, our exports would now be about 66 billion. And compared to 21 billion, if 66 billion, that would have been at least 300 times more. So we and two reasons other than local energy issues or whatever, two trade policy reasons were also big factors in our bad performance. One is our trade policy. Contrary to what our commentators, policymakers, economists think, we are not a very open economy. We are one of the closest economies. You look at any data from any source, we have the highest tariffs. If you look at our taxes, almost half the taxes come from the ports, from imports. That means you try to stop imports, that means you're putting a tax on exports. So that's one big problem that we are facing, and unless we get rid of it, because no other country, they look at anywhere, has more than, say, maybe maximum they would get is about 10, 15% from imports. Others, like Turkey, would be, 2%, etc. But Pakistan gets more than, so that's, our tax policy is completely distorted, and tariff policies. We are trying to do something, but our speed is very, very slow. Our next problem is trade facilitation. Although I must say, last year, or in these 2 years, we made some good progress on automation, and we improved our rank on trading across the borders. But we are still, in the last, we are still less than, we are not even in the top 100. We are 111th or something. And only 10 years ago, or say when I was in FBR, at the time I remember our ranking, we were always at least somewhere in the first 100. Now it's getting there is a big challenge for us. So and unless we a recent report that Munib just mentioned, and they said that in case of other countries, these barriers to export, the non-tariff barriers, they may become something like 20% from inside the country. In our case, almost half the barriers are our own creation. Munib was just referring to my yesterday's article, where I say that, for example, our inspection system, these are, there is the customs, there is the drug enforcement, then there are many branches of customs. So there's so much, and physical inspections. I mean, the world has changed. Now it's all automation and risk profiling. Pakistan is still what it was, 60 years ago. They open up the containers, and they open up the packing, and they just spoils the thing. So according to this survey, which covered something like 1,200 exporters, which was conducted by the World Bank and ITC, this almost 1/3 of the total problems our exporters face is through this intrusive inspection. So these are the general point. And yeah, one final point on this. When this trade facilitation agreement came, our mission in Geneva was very active. We're trying to push, but unfortunately, the agreement has been concluded and everything. But our speed at FBR is, or the Ministry of Commerce, is not, we are not catching up. For example, there are 3 basic categories of implementation of these measures. And you know, the countries have a choice. They can say, okay, we can do this right away. This will take 2-3 years. And the third category is that we will do it once we get uh, technical assistance or support from other countries. Now, if I look at India, they said we'll do everything ourselves. We don't need any support. And they started working on it. Pakistan put almost everything, all the difficult steps, I would say, in category C. When we get any technical assistance, then we do. And these are some of the simple things which can be easily done, like, you know, electronic payments. It's already happening, so we can do it all over the country. Risk management, we can, you know, we have been doing this for a long time. And, you know, and say, if we want to check how long it takes, now, I don't know how much time I'm left. I've taken a little bit. Yeah, Munib, is it okay? I didn't look at time. I have 2-3 minutes?
So yes, so 2-3 minutes is, you can go on for another 2-3 minutes.
2-3 minutes, okay. So, and all these things which I think, you know, people like Slamat and others in the FBR can do it. Maybe they have a problem with single window, because that needs connection with many other departments, and they are not automated. And that is already being funded by the World Bank, by DFID, by others. Okay, I can leave that. But other things, and as Slamat was saying, life has changed. We can no longer wait for another 3-4 years. We have to expedite. You know, we just saw in other sectors, in grocery shopping, in education, everywhere, this automation has come in. So customs cannot wait for another 3, 4, 5 years to do those things. They have to be very quick, and they have to speed up their system. So these are my general points. Now, I was asked to focus on 3 things, I think. One, that you know, countries have put new restrictions and how affecting trade, and I think that was covered by Salam, and so I'll just pass by on that. The second was that what are various international organizations doing, or what have initiatives they've taken, and Slamet has also covered that, but maybe just I'd like to add that every organization, say, you know, WCO, World Customs Organization, they adopted a resolution and pointed out various instruments they already have for dealing with these pandemics and for any natural disasters. And they said, you know, countries need to look at those and adopt those for quick clearance. So similarly, UNCTAD adopted a 10-point agenda, you know, about shipping, about all the trade-related things, and that's how it should go. WTO said, okay, you know, we cannot really, we don't have any automatic rules for stopping countries if some country wants to say, okay, we don't let ventilators go out because this country is sovereign right, and there's an exception clause there. But they said, okay, we will make it transparent so that the countries just don't, you know, take these measures. And they put up a website, they put up notifications that whichever country is putting whatever restriction, and Slamet touched on that. Now, the third point was, I don't know what the third point, well, I forget, I think Vikas asked me, but anyway, I'll quickly go to, you know, they also asked me, they said, you know, you are a very experienced old man, so why don't you give a few recommendations, and I'll quickly go through that. One, my first recommendation is that when this COVID thing happened, the World Bank analyzed all the tariffs of various import taxes, and they said they did at least for a survey of 20 countries. And Pakistan was one of the 3 with the highest taxes. So FBR and our command control center, etc., they did exemption for 3 months, and they extended by 3 months more. But you know, these are essential things. I think we should not really be among the highest. We should make it like other countries, have it, you know, very low taxes or no taxes. So we should, these emergency things, we should, already I think that is expired, now it will be taxes, so it will not become, so we should take care of this, that at least these health related things, because our spending is so low on health related things, so we should allow them duty free. My second recommendation is that I think that I've already discussed this, that we should quickly, category C, we should review what we have, and we try to do it ourselves, not wait forever for World Bank or DFID or Salamat to come from there and do it. We can do it ourselves. And my third recommendation is that we have many of these useless restrictions and bans. For example, at the time now for this COVID, many countries started using these 3D printers to quickly make these ventilators. Now, Pakistan also made its prototype, but 3D printing, we think that, oh, maybe it could be used for making guns or something. The whole world is now printing, making use of these things, but Pakistan, we don't allow it. So I like our government to look at these things and try to modernize their procedure and not be stuck about 20 years or 30 years ago. And finally, I would like to say that, we are one of the countries which has the lowest trade in the region, less than 5%. Now, when this COVID thing came, we also stopped transit trade to Afghanistan and others. We should need to look at so that, in such times, now the whole SARC kind of came together. Eventually, Pakistan also put some money, tried to exchange these goods, but Pakistan kind of stayed out. So I would like it to, keep the politics separate and these trade things separate. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Manzoor. I think you highlighted a couple of very, very important points there. The first being that import duties are just, I think the best way to kind of say it, in this way, the import taxes are nothing but export taxes in disguise. Introducing sunset clauses to tariff protection is the key to eliminating the anti-export bias. I also really appreciated the points that you made that we kind of need a much more dynamic approach rather than a static one. And the fact that we've kind of left all the category C reforms to the end is kind of setting yourself up, I think, a little bit for disaster. And then the customs will really kind of have to adapt their approach. I think here, one of the suggestions that I have had, and I've had a long discussion with the author, Craig Atkinson, of an article that I've just kind of posted in the chat box, where he suggests that a country's National Trade Facilitation Committee should be this driving force rather than the customs. Now, I am unfortunately the novice in this debate, and I could be wrong, but I think the National Trade Facilitation Committee would be the best placed to kind of get a multi-stakeholder consensus and kind of move on with things. The second part of that article also puts up this idea of rules as data. I would definitely hope that this idea kind of at least slowly starts to move within the policymakers' heads, and they kind of at least start to try and think about it. With that, I will move on to our next guest, Ms. Faiza. I'm sorry, I apologize for mispronouncing the name of your organization, Ms. Faiza. Ms. Faiza is serving as the General Secretary of the Pakistan-Afghanistan Joint Chambers of Commerce and Industry. The body pushes for economic collaboration from business community across borders, despite the existing troubled situation between the two countries. The chamber was established to provide a level playing field for promoting the bilateral trade and investment, ensuring transfers of technology, and exploring new trade opportunities. Ms. Faiza, I think, is best positioned to give us the view of the private sector and all the relevant stakeholders involved from that particular end. So, Ms. Faiza, with that, I welcome you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Muneeb. Assalamu alaikum all. And first of all, thank you, Waqar, for making me part of this very interesting forum. And I have this, feeling that what should I talk about after Salama Saab, and more specifically after Manzoor Saab, who's already shed light on most of the issues that our country is, posing to its export neighbors. And he has been very, very honest and direct, and I really appreciate the way he has shared the, issues. Second, Muneeb, it is okay to mispronounce it, because a lot of people do mispronounce it. So we keep it simple and we call it Pachi. So to make it very easier for us. And another very important thing that I want to thank Waqar for is making the only female part of this platform, so I get that edge. Okay, now moving on to your 3 questions, I'll quickly pass on to that, and I would cut off those points which are already spoken about by Manzoor Saab, which are generic in nature. I will only focus on Pakistan, Afghanistan, bilateral and transit trade, because otherwise what Manzoor Saab has just mentioned is the same cases. We are facing the same dilemmas, whether it is local export or whatever it is. So first question was due to COVID-19, how trade flows was affected and what are the new rules or what are the new challenges that has came across specifically in the Afghanistan-Pakistan transit trade and bilateral trade. Now, interestingly, as Manzoor was just mentioning, the only country with which we have trade surplus and we have a transit trade corridor is Afghanistan. And unfortunately, we're not facilitating that in the true spirit. Just imagine Pakistan having only one country which has a high trade surplus. 70% of our exports goes there and we only take 30%, and then 30% has recently increased. It was only, I think, 15 to 20% that we used to take from it. Similarly, as a transit corridor, we take a lot of products from there and re-export to a lot of countries, and that gives us a momentum, a very huge momentum. At one point in time, the trade surplus was of a nature which could have equated our current deficit account. So just imagine the importance of this country. But we have tremendously kind of ruined the working equation with Afghanistan, and the cost of doing business is tremendously increasing. Despite all problems, all political upheavals, we need to understand that economy cannot follow politics. It should be other way around. So for example, if you look in the region, China and India are the most important rivals in the region. But look at their exports and imports and the way they, sort of transact with each other. Bangladesh may not have good terms with India to a greater extent, but look at their trade quantum with each other. Why can't Pakistan enjoy the same? And why can't we give certain facilitation to a landlocked country and take advantage from it in Central Asia? Because this is the only plausible land route to Central Asia, which is an untapped region, and Pakistan could be the first one to venture into it. But unfortunately, as Manzoor Saab has rightly said, we are not taking advantages where it is due. The theory of competitive advantage, we have totally not read the way it should have been read. So first question was how it has brought in restrictions amid COVID-19. I am very embarrassed to tell you that a lot of restrictions were there even pre-COVID. Like for example, there are 5 regimes that an importer need to follow if it has to take its product from Pakistan to Afghanistan. It's insurance guarantee, it's scanning, it's tracking, bonded carrier, and then obviously all the checkpoints and everything, right? Now with all these measures taken in, and then you say, oh my God, the smuggling is going on. That's really not on. That's very embarrassing on part of us. And then Afghani importers tell us after 5 different measures, you cannot guarantee that, parallel economy is curbed. You need to understand, see, now the transit trade from Pakistan to Afghanistan due to different stringent measures have moved towards Iran. 70% of transit trade comes from Iran and, from Central Asia, not from Pakistan. We are only giving them 30%. And that too, with restrictions on Wagah, a lot of times the transit trade gets declined. Now, keeping that in view, only 30% and so much monitoring going on. Fencing is going on also. And then we say, no, we have to be very strict. Just imagine the kind of cost of doing business. We need to improve our border management system. That is how we suggested. 70% of the transit trade comes from another side. So we need to improve our border management system to stop from Afghanistan entrance into Pakistan rather than from Pakistan believing that the products do not go into Afghanistan. After 5 stringent measures, products do go to Afghanistan. And that is a short factual discussion that we've already done with Ministry of Commerce. And a lot of people vouch it. Even DG Transit Trade last time, Sarfraz Varaj, very openly said that there's no, now there's no leakage after these 5 monitoring systems. Lately, we have made a suggestion that either do scanning or tracking. Unfortunately, as Manzoor Saab was mentioning, during COVID, our government has increased the scanning to 100%. Do you understand what 100% scanning means? On an average basis, we receive 1,000 to 2,000 consignments on port. And now looking at the port and the congestion at the port and the scanners available on the port, just imagine we were talking to terminals and each terminal just have one scanner, which has a capacity to clear 100 containers per day. Now, if you tell them to scan 100% and there are 1,000 containers at a particular terminal, what do you expect? What kind of standard container situation will you expect? And that happened in COVID. Then at the COVID at the cross border, there was exhaustive quarantine measures taken. Okay, at the 0 point, our two truck drivers used to go from Pakistan. They used to get quarantined. Then Afghani driver used to take over from 0 point. He used to go into Afghanistan, used to go get quarantined. Then the offloading used to take place, and he used to bring the next driver used to bring the truck cross border at the 0 point, and Pakistani driver. You just imagine. While hearing it out, it's so difficult to speak on. So just imagine how difficult it would be. Now NLC has, sort of installed scanners at the border, but the fee is separate. What we've heard from the private stakeholder, approximately for the parking only, and then scanning, whether we get the scanning done or not, the parking only costs between 3,000 to 5,000. Just imagine the cost of doing business. Whether you want to park or you don't want to park, you have to pay that parking fee if you have to get the custom clearance done. Then at the port, the scanners are not working. At Turkham border, the scanners were not working. At Chaman, recently, because of the fencing and the new visa regime that all people have to take visa, the tribal areas have gone on to strike. Right now, approximately, as we get from the reliable sources, 6,000 to 7,000 containers are stuck on an average at the port. And if you go to Turkham border or Chaman border, you'll see line of containers stuck there stranded. So you can very well imagine it's not just, I would not say it's not just COVID. Yes, COVID has increased the time of processing, but already our unimproved measures and our policies that we've not improved before COVID is still making the things aggravated. You all would know, I hope, that trackers are not available. Authority available is TPL. Monopoly is given to a company which is charging heavily. And in COVID, they say we do not have trackers. I've just told you that 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 containers have been stuck at the port, and only on a daily basis, 200 to 300 trackers are available. So you can very well imagine what we're talking about. Okay, then moving towards the recently what PACHI has given as the trade facilitation proposals. We've given several proposals, and we've been sharing it with SDPI because SDPI has always been a good partner in research and feedback sharing. We have recently given them a complete proposal on the APTA and PTA as to how we can engage with PTA with Afghanistan in order to facilitate Afghanistan and get the preferential treatment from Afghanistan when it comes to our export, at least in the region, right? Then secondly, we've talked about regulation of shipping lines or getting some negotiations with shipping lines. Shipping lines in Pakistan are totally unregulated. They can impose whatever detention they want to. They can cancel out any holidays that they want to. So just imagine right now, the cost of detention per day is $100 to $125. And as I mentioned, pre-COVID, if it was on an average 14 to 28 days to cross border, right now 56 days are required to cross border, including the custom clearance and a lot of FC checking and a lot of 100% scanning for all containers. One important significant thing that we also proposed to Ministry of Commerce when Tariq Huda Saab was there, and now he's in FBR, and we reiterated the same proposal. When there used to be a loose cargo, it was a requirement that every cargo should have had a mark of in transit to Afghanistan. But now just imagine it's a containerized cargo. It comes under sealing. At the port also it is sealed, then it's scanned. Then at the border it is sealed. Why do you need to have a in transit to Afghanistan on everything? Okay, tires, you might stamp in transit to Afghanistan on every tire, but just imagine pencils. You cannot put stamp on every damn pencil stating in transit to Afghanistan. And then just imagine these trucks, these tires are used by ambassadors also in Afghanistan or a lot of private stakeholders in Afghanistan. And when the car is moving, the truck says in transit to Afghanistan, it looks very, very embarrassing. You already have so much security measures undertaken. Why these smaller issues are made important issues and trade is restricted? Okay, then we have digital trade platform. I'm sorry, I would fail to give you any suggestions on that. Why? Because Just imagine between the two countries right now, internet facilitation is not there. At the customs, at the border, if you go at the customs, the fundamental problem that you're facing is internet is not working, Vibok is not working, banking system is not there. Just imagine when there's no banking parallel system, what more technological you can offer. Sir was just talking about e-commerce facility, and he was very right. When a small shop can have a, exhaustive e-payment system, we do not have an e-payment system. Waqar would acknowledge, we recently launched our trade portal to bring a digital platform whereby we are helping Afghani and border-related private stakeholders to have their own, page online via which they can at least market and people can come in direct contact with them. These people do not have their email addresses. Okay, they cannot log in. They do not know how to log in into a particular. They are very good with mobile phones. They can write a lot in Pashto on mobile phones and Android. When it comes to website page or putting up pictures of their products, they cannot do it. And we are doing it for every individual people. Now, if you ask me which digital trade transformation, I really need to ask the government. When would day COVID, when we used to say that it's insignificant to travel, like we're doing right now, very good webinar right now. We used to suggest let us do a lot of webinars, right? Why do we have to travel every other day to Islamabad? It's very costly, time consuming, wastage of time. We used to get an idea, no, we cannot do it. We cannot go on Zoom, we cannot go on Skype. Thanks to COVID, now we are utilizing that platform. So just imagine what digital transformation mechanism can be proposed when even the government systems are still not aligned. We have launched our portal, people are liking it, but the kind of understanding, and even the government connectivity is totally missing from there. Recently, the embassies have started taking online papers for visas. Even in Azerbaijan, country like Azerbaijan, which is a very small country, has an e-visa system. You get visa in 3 hours. And in Pakistan and Afghanistan, between Pakistan and Afghanistan, you have to submit everything manually just to get visa to go to your neighbor country. So if in your neighbor country, your communication is paralyzed, if your visa regime is very difficult, what trade do you expect? I totally urge this forum and Waqar, if he's kind of preparing an advocacy document, please urge government that one, politics should be separated from economy. Economic imperatives should guide what politics should be. And secondly, expedite the process of appealing to your neighbor countries, specifically Afghanistan. I understand there are political problems. I understand there are a lot of issues. That I would close on this. Just imagine a border which is very unguarded, where person like me and you, would not want to go and read and locate and do business. Who would do business out there? Naturally, parallel entities would do business. So if you really want to transform business out there, you have to make it open. You have to improve the regime so that people like me, you, private stakeholders can go there and do business. Another proper proposals that we have,
Sorry,
and we are looking for
Ms. Faisal, if you can just wind up.
I'll just close on that. We have proposed to World Bank and ADB to fund us to do border borderless businesses, where a market is there at a 0 point between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and border people can go there without any levies, without any taxes. They can do businesses, and that would improve economy, that would bring them into the mainstream, and they would particularly guard and ensure the security. Thank you so much for giving me extra time. As a female, I took the advice.
No, thank you very much, Ms. Faisal. I think it's very important to give the private sector their share of the time. Naturally, which is why I think you've highlighted some of the key issues. In particular, I think you remember what your main arguments reminded me of something Dr. Salamat once wrote in an LSE blog back in 2016, which I've just opened up again. He said, Pakistan still has the potential to reduce trade costs significantly by improving shipping connectivity and enhancing its logistics performance. Unfortunately, unless these two critical areas are solved, trade facilitation agreements will not solve the problems automatically. With that, sir, I would like to invite Riyaz Sheikh Saab from TDAP, representative. And sir, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Manisa. I think it's good to talk and after listening such learned speakers who are part of this panel. Thank you very much, Dr. Waqar Saab, also for giving me that opportunity to speak here. Briefly, I would explain what TDAP actually does in terms of facilitation to exporters and to some extent importers also, the businessmen as a whole. So we issue certain sort of, first we say the domestic, facilitation, what we provide through our product divisions to the exporters who want to export their products, how to export, the procedure, as well as what kind of product it should be acceptable in the international market. Then we come to the international side. Then those who are able to export, we provide them the market opportunity, market access, and through delegations, through exhibitions, participating there internationally. TDAP used to participate more than 100 exhibitions, before this COVID thing, which has now reduced definitely to 35 to 38. So this briefly on that, and then we facilitate the exporters also in their protocol passes at the airports. We sell visa facilitation letters and all that. This is briefly what we, apart from the help desk, which definitely the first contact point for all the exporters if they want some information about some country or some product, that is also provided through email or on phone or in the meeting. Now coming to the topic, I will try to restrict myself to the topic and especially phrase the three questions that what COVID thing has done. We all know that the export figures are down, not only in Pakistan but all over the world. Pakistan's export for last financial year has shrunk to 6.8%, this minus 6.8, and it is anticipated that this year also, depending on the COVID thing, if I take the pessimistic view and say that the COVID goes on for another 1 or 2 years and there's no improvement, then of course the figure would remain negative. Because in last night I was listening to Germany's statement that COVID is going to stay for another 3 years. Nobody knows, but keeping that in view, but at the optimistic point of view, we can say that if it, from the Pakistan's perspective, the way we are handling it through NCOC or the NCC, the forums which have been formed, to tackle this menace or this COVID thing, I think the things are under control, and then we will try to improve. But again, internationally, it depends on the whole world, how they respond to you and how these things, their countries, the situation is. So we expect that things would improve. Now coming to this restrictions which has imposed. I mean, the COVID, as all other speakers have said, it is the exports are down, but this thing has provided an opportunity also to all of us to explore new markets, to explore new products, and start working on a different way. This and what is called the new normal, to adjust yourself in the new normal. So what Pakistan is also not the exception. It has developed some new products. I mean, particularly the products which we never exported, like PPEs, tannic suits, like masks, either surgical or the cloth mask, simple, and then the sanitizers also. What we do earlier, the ethanol, the ethyl alcohol, which was the byproduct of the sugar industry, we used to export it in raw form. It is in industrial use all over the world, making alcohols and all that, and pharmaceutical also. But later on, when we thought and that this thing might be needed in the country, making the sanitizers, then of course the whole that thing is diverted to that industry, and the sanitizers are not only produced but are being exported. So this was a good thing, that the opportunity also whenever there is a fall in export on the other grounds. Similarly, we have worked on new markets also. So one opportunity that has given by COVID, actually, we explored some new markets and some new products. And the other way, the way of meetings, as Madam has also pointed out, other speakers also, we were never comfortable in discussing the meetings in the form of virtual or webinar. But now this thing has forced us to do that. This has not only saved the cost, but also the hassle and the commutation time, particularly in a city like Karachi, where I'm sitting right now. That the people who come, even the local exporters, the association people who used to come to our office, they find it difficult. If the meeting is for 1 hour, it takes them more than 2 hours, to find the parking and then coming there in the traffic. So good things have, at least, this thing has been encouraged. Now I come to the normal, facilitation thing which we have. Most of our seminars which we used to do regularly. But I think first I would touch upon the restrictions, going to the theme of that discussion. The restrictions which we faced, or our exporters faced particularly, is the cargo or freight restriction. Most of the countries, if I could recall correctly, I think after the COVID, around 50 countries have changed their port protocols, ranging from port closures, quarantine measures, and some additional documentation requirements, which has put our exporters in trouble. Some people whose cargo was in transit have also faced a lot of difficulties to get it cleared. So these things have happened. There are some countries who have set up green lanes at port of entry and border crossings to accelerate the processings of the cargo shipments. Similarly, if we talk about the lockdown, we also have faced the lockdown, and there was a lot of debate in country, political point of view, that lockdown should be that sort or that sort, it should be partial, it should be smart, or whatever it is. So in that case, actually, to keep the economic cycle running, and particularly the exports of the country running, TDEP was assigned the task from the federal government to verify the export veracity of the export orders, and then recommend that these factories of the export sector need to be opened in any case. We did that, and alhamdulillah, I think when this exercise was complete in 2.5 months, I think long, at that time we verified around 2,800 factories all over the country that were recommended to the respective provincial governments for opening, and these factories were opened with all the SOPs, and then the export cycle, the movement of the export cargo kept on moving. So on lockdowns, we have similarly the supply chains are also disturbed. We have seen that the products coming from the different channels has also faced problems. There are additional health and safety, measures or issues that came up or were required for the exporters to fulfill. Similarly, limits on the mobility of the people, that also. So these kind of, what should I say, the restrictions or differences that has been faced by our people. If I touch about the needs of how to innovate or this trade facilitation thing, then of course at this moment I think focus on services I should say is one of the alternate along with the goods we need to focus on, and then move most of the things, most of our efforts, facilitation or marketing efforts, towards the digital thing. The new phenomena which has started in the exhibition, the seminars, as I've already told, have been mostly converted to webinars. We used to conduct the training for exporters like National Exporters Training Program, the NETP, which we have developed with the help or support of IBA. These 6 programs earlier we conducted physically, and then the last 2 we have converted to as virtual, webinars. Similarly, on the dissemination information of the China-Pakistan Free Trade Agreement Phase 2, where we were given access to 313, tariff lines, so zero tariff. So that has also was in process. It has started, but from March onwards it was stopped. Now again it's been converted into virtual or like Zoom webinars. So this thing, we have changed ourselves. Similarly on the exhibition side, most of the exhibition organizers in Frankfurt, in USA, Canada, and I think in Paris also, they have asked that our exhibitors could participate virtually. Of course, the response is not that encouraging, but this is a new thing. We need to encourage, or should I say, guide our exporters to be part of it, because if this is the norm which has to be there in place for quite long, then they have to be, what should I say, be participative. They should be thinking that this is the way they can participate. some of the countries like Japan have started a hybrid model wherein they ask our exhibitors or exporters to take a stand, but for manning the stand or presentation, the locals from the Japan, let's say, be represented or present there on their stalls. They need not to go, but this is how the hybrid model is also working in some countries. So these are the developments we have seen, this after COVID. This has really changed the way the facilitation measures are adopted. And the other thing which is related to what Dr. Manzoor Saab has also highlighted, and Salamat Saab also know that under the facilitation agreement, which Pakistan has signed, after that there is a national single window project being going on, which is FBI is the focal agency for that. This is actually in reply to your, this third area which I talked upon, the digital trade facilitation. All those certificates, because TDAP is mandated to issue the certificate of origins under FTAs and PTA. So what we issued actually in the paper form that has been accepted by the respective country, and they get the advantage which they are entitled under this FTA. But nowadays that all these physical certificates are being integrated through national single window in the form of digital certification. Once that project would be over, it was supposed to be over by last June, but due to COVID, it has been extended for some months. And then hopefully by the end of this year, or maybe first quarter of the next year, if it concludes, then most of the certifications or documentation, which was in paper form for which every exporter has to come to our office, purchase this form or get this form, fill in, and then submit it again with the stamps and all that. All these things should be going online. The other thing is that is the gold jewelry trade, which is also controlled through an SRO called 760I/2013. So that also, gold jewelry movement and precious metals have a lot of restrictions and a lot of requirements of documents, passbook entries and all that. So these things also are getting digitized. Once it is done, I think mostly the interface of the man-to-man interface would be reduced, I think. So these things from my side, recommendation I keep open because let the floor be decisive. But of course, one big recommendation would be that now since we have come to the digitization or moving towards the digital way, then I think we should stick to it. And if there need be, if there is some legislation required, because most of the time it happens that the people say that the meeting was digital and the minutes were not approved or something like this. So the procedural issues should also be seen in that context. And once these meetings, once these webinars, once these virtual exhibitions, all this get along, and then I think that would be good for the trade, good for the facilitation, and good for the exporters also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So just to kind of touch on your last point there, Riasab, what specific methods are actually being introduced to, sorry, so the question asked by Joseph Putman is, what specific methods are actually being introduced to digitize the trade rules of Pakistan and with its primary trade partners? Can you shed some light on that?
Last, can you please repeat that? I didn't hear the last.
So what specific methods are actually being introduced to digitize efforts towards promoting exports? It's a question which has been put forward by Mr. Joseph and Mr. Tahir as well.
Okay, good. As I mentioned in my talk, that when we say that for the export, it's the promotion part, the digitized methods are, from now onwards, next 2 months, TDAP will be launching its first virtual exhibition to promote the exports of Pakistan. That would be in the textile sector. Similarly, we have planned after that every month, it will be surgical sector and then the sports goods sector and then some other fruit and vegetable sectors. Initially, 4 exhibitions. The things have been finalized, and one of the company we have hired from the market through the tendering process being assigned the task. And then next 2 months, hopefully the first exhibition will be launched. This is on the exhibition side. The good thing about that, the exhibitions, such exhibitions, we get the invites through our commercial counselors, the trade and investment officers who are posted in around 52 to 53 countries. They are connected or integrated with us. So we get the international marketing help from them. So buyers would also come through them, touch upon that, and then there will be B2B matchmaking, meetings on that, which we are separately also promoting through this digital platform. And as I mentioned on the training side for the exporters, if they are new or even established, maybe and they don't know much about these exports, we have, even recently, I think day before yesterday, 8th September, we have done the seminar on National Exporters Training Program for the Faisalabad people, but it was through Facebook and then YouTube being seen and heard by almost everybody who was related to or registered with that.
Very much. So just a couple of suggestions to you, Mr. Riyasa, before we move. The hybrid model that you're talking about, I think Mr. Tahir has mentioned that would be absolutely great within the context of Japan. And he's very kindly, joined us today. He is the Trade and Investment Counselor at the Embassy of Pakistan in Tokyo. So I would definitely facilitate a conversation between the two of you so you can move this forward. Secondly, sir, with respect to the training, the training initiatives that TDAP is carrying out, Ms. Mahnoor has actually also pointed out that women obviously are 50% of our population, and if we do kind of need to move forward, we need to integrate and utilize, the female population as well as the male population. Hopefully you could kind of derive specific interventions in training programs in areas such as handicrafts, traditionally seen as more female-oriented industries. Traditionally, of course, I say, not bound, to change at all. And then secondly, last point that I'd kind of like to drive, sir, there's a recent World Bank article that says the Trade Development Authority of Pakistan should take note of this fast changing reality that has occurred as a result of COVID and leverage artificial intelligence and big data to help exporters harness the potential of online marketing platforms. This approach actually, sir, was already initiated and is being implemented in Portugal. So, sir, I would definitely recommend these 3 steps forward, and I will try and facilitate a conversation with Mr. Tahir from the Japanese embassy so that we can kind of focus hybrid models at least with Japan as a trading partner. With that, I would like to move to a second area of a very popular question, which is related to taxation. A lot of people have asked so I think for a start, I think we all kind of would agree that perhaps import duties are being imposed because it's the easiest way to collect tax. Dr. Ikramul Haq, who joins us today, is one of the leading experts of taxation, and he suggests that we should kind of more move towards a zero duty regime, especially for textile inputs. Perhaps I would kind of like to get a little bit more view on this taxation and tariff issue from Dr. Manzoor, and what would be the best way to kind of move towards this tariff removal, gradually or immediately? What would you suggest, sir?
I would suggest that Pakistan should benchmark its taxation policies with any successful developing countries, any countries maybe in the region, 4 or 5 countries, and try to do that. And, and this dependence on import taxes, this is hurting everybody. I mean, we heard from Ms. Faiza how difficult we make for transit trade. It's just because we have very high taxes on imports. So everything, either it comes from Afghanistan, and we have put a whole wire along all our borders. I think we are the only country, perhaps other than North Korea, which has put this barbed wire all along, and still everything is smuggled, and we need to carry out some reforms here. We are doing it, but very slowly. What we have done in the last 2 years is for these industries to get their raw materials free. This is a big step forward, but unless you make your industry competitive and give them some competition, they will hold on. They like the status quo. They don't like any competition. We had our car industry, now it's 60, 70 years. We set up in 1950s, but still they always say we are infant. So if they're infant, now we recently had this electric car policy, and our car industry stopped it. They said we don't need, for the time being, these electric cars. Now the whole world is moving towards that. So we have to take care of somehow, these, and the other thing is, we have, I think Dr. Ikram is an expert on this, but we have too many withholding taxes, everywhere withholding taxes. And then we say, okay, we refund some of these taxes to exporters, which we don't, we create a lot of problems there, a lot of corruption there. So we have, everything is very distorted. Was that your point, or was it something? It could happen in the long term, but in the short term, oh, sorry. Is my internet connection okay, or should I move to? You can hear me?
It's working absolutely fine, sir. We can hear you.
Okay.
Yep,
okay.
sir, we can hear you.
Okay, some countries, like, say, I always like to give this example of Chile. They brought all their tariffs to 10%. They said, we don't want any mafias, we don't want any special lobbies, and then reduced it to 6%. Now Chile is the most prosperous country in Latin America. They are a part of OECD. So we have to take some reform. Otherwise, we forever will stay like this. And also we will, we don't allow any of our bordering provinces like Balochistan, like KP, to take part in trade. Instead, we spend a lot of money on maintaining law and order and things. I mean, let them trade so that they have some activity. So I would very strongly say that there's a serious need for reform of our taxation, all taxation, tariff policy, and all this. And not over the next 10 years, maybe over the next 2-3 years.
Absolutely, sir. I think this delayed reaction is as good as no reaction, and that definitely applies here in our case. Just to kind of move on, and I'd like to kind of put a question forward to Dr. Salamat Saab. In particular, sir, one of the biggest problems that we've had in Pakistan, specifically related to exports, and perhaps maybe you can shed some light on this within the context of the Pakistan single window, and then Riyaz Sheikh Saab can shed this, on a more kind of a capacity building way. What specific measures are being taken where, Dr. Salamat Saab, the process is being automated when it comes to the certification, the quality certification of various goods, whether it is agriculture or manufacturing? Would love to have your thoughts on that. So some of the main problems that have been kind of highlighted today, how is the Pakistan single window designed, and how will it move forward that it would kind of address these key issues?
Right, so thank you, Munib. It's a very interesting question, and this project of National Single Window is very close to my heart because I have been working on it for 2 years in Pakistan, and now I am helping many other countries to design single window, and currently I have work going on in Jamaica, Guyana, and Kenya on single window. So coming to this issue of design, so let me start with that. Pakistan single window, it is our obligation to the WTO, but on the top of that, the kind of NTMs which Dr. Manzoor Saab has mentioned and issues which Ms. Faiza has raised, the single window is basically designed to tackle these issues of paperwork, delays, documentation, especially electronic submission and electronic processing. These are two main components. So the way it is going to be unfolding, it's evolutionary process. So trader will be having to face only one portal with all submissions, all processing, and connection, interaction with all agencies has to be through single point of contact. That's why we call it single window. If you need to contact the bank or letter of credit, if he needs to contact to agriculture department to get SPS certificate, or if they need to contact PDAP to get rules of origin, so they have single point of contact. That will be the main thing. But behind that, there is a big science, a big technology. Maybe they go to blockchain or they go to distributed ledger. That's the main processing system. But one thing I would like to clarify, the main strength of Pakistan on single window, the way they are moving, I really like the idea. So there is top-down push and there is also bottom-up approach. Because we started with survey of all regulatory agencies, documented their procedures, listed physically their system, how they're handling. And there's a top push from the finance minister and secretaries of different 12 agencies, which are main regulator in trade. So today I heard that there's a meeting going on in FBR to launch the first phase. So there's a big push from the bottom as well as from the top. The trader community is interested, and government is also interested, and bank ADB is also interested. Hopefully we will see a light of day very soon. And another thing which I like about this single window, and hopefully it will work on, that Customs Department decided to automate business processes of other agencies also, which will never ever happen if they don't do it. Because especially these food ministry and other departments, they still don't have even the computers. So single window will be providing them this background infrastructure, training, equipment, all these kind of unique qualities. Hopefully we can see that we can get rid of automation, this paperwork, and move to automation and quick processing. We can talk about it a lot, but I want to stop here and address any other question specifically on that.
So just to kind of move towards the second part of that, I'd like to ask Mr. Riyashik Saab, what specific intervention is TDAP undertaking to help local exporters with meeting international standards and certifications?
For those specific industries, we conduct specific seminars along with their associations. Particularly, the women are encouraged, to participate not only in the exhibition but go as part of the delegation. We have 50% reserve quota for them, and apart from that, we do organize the two specific exhibitions. One is the Blue Fair that organized every year in Multan for the pottery and all these ceramic products. And the secondly, what we do for this women exporters is actually the WEXNet, WEXNET. That specific event is for the handicraft, for the small, this cottage industry items produced, like gift items, like onyx items, like other items which are produced by them. So this is how, they are represented in our scheme of things for the promotion of exports and then participation in the nation. Now, the other thing, if I recall, you asked about the manufacturers, how do we facilitate them? What do we have the policy? Manufacturers, the scheme, there are different schemes, by the government, and particularly in this COVID thing, whenever the the reimbursements, the export proceeds of the reimbursement of the export proceeds, which used to come, which the State Bank has allowed 180 days, it has now been extended for another 90 days. Similar things, this relaxations in time has been given for the exporters. They have given extra, this loan facilities on very short, this very thin margin markup, so that they can cater for the labor and all that. Should not be. These kind of schemes have been announced by the government. From the TDAS point of view, we normally, just held a meeting with them and then concentrate on their specific issues, take up with them with the relevant agencies. And on their request, particularly, I recall, one important issue for the rice sector people. They always complain for the inspections that the inspectors of the DPP, the Department of Plant Protection, they are very less in number. They don't have the manpower or the skill, the machinery to check all that consignment. Because of it, the consignments got delayed, and particularly in the COVID also at the port. So we supported that in that, and through some financing mechanism, their capacity is also being built now, so that there can be no excuse or no limitation on that. So these kind of things we are doing.
And so specifically, when it comes to certification of it to comply with international standards and secure the right certifications, for instance, a lot has been said recently about Pakistan has a comparative advantage. I think it was Razak Daud Saab who said that Pakistan will be the next PP manufacturer exporter hub. But unfortunately, the problem is that Pakistan just fails to meet the international standards and the right certifications to even reach those markets. What are the kind of active steps that are being taken in that regard?
These certifications, getting these certifications or some sort of, specific tests, sorry, for those specific sectors like leather. Leather people used to come to us, say that these are the specific tests which their buyer want in that respective market. So you do support us. So sometimes, these schemes are being covered in the trade policies. I remember this SDPI, the Strategic Trade Policy Framework of 2009 to 12, and then 12 to 15. Both covered all that. The ISO certification, if somebody wants to do, if some sort of a specific test some factories or some sector wants to do, they were also supported. Similarly in pharmaceutical also, because they have a lot of registration issues and a lot of certifications, they were also being supported. So schemes do come, but on the specific nature. But generally, certification support we do provide through policy intervention through Ministry of Commerce. And but we don't, of course, do the certification. All these certifications are either given by certain accredited authorities. And particularly, if I talk about the halal thing, halal is a very big market. But when it talks about the certification, Pakistan Halal Authority the law has been passed from the Parliament maybe in 2015 or 16, even before. But the rules are not yet framed. That is under Ministry of Science and Technology. So most of the certification issues, I would say that either with the Ministry of Science and Technology or with the Ministry of National Food Security and Research. So through what we support, whoever from the export sector comes to us for that support, we try to include as proposal in either through policy or through issuing some approval from the Ministry of Commerce and then issuing the public notice and then giving them the support, financial support in that, because the cost of these tests is always very high. That's why.
Okay, thank you very much, Rasab. I think the specific point that you made with respect to the food processing industry, I think, sir, and I think it keeps on coming back to these two key points: high tariffs and facilitation of exporters to the highest potential. So let me quote something from a World Bank report. With effective rates of protection at 261% for food processing, for example, it is unlikely Pakistani makers will go global anytime soon, since they will prefer the coziness of the highly protected domestic market. Here, I think, sir, I might revert back to Dr. Manzoor. As an economist, I find this idea to be ridiculous, that I'm sure in the 70s and 80s we had this infant industry argument that we have to have these high rates of protection, but when are these infants going to grow up, in your opinion? Or is it just like a 40-year-old kid who doesn't have a job and stays at home?
I think I've repeatedly said this point again and again. But in the 80s that you referred to, most countries were like this. Even China, India, everybody, they were import substitution, etc. They were all like this. But then they moved on. I mean, in India, China, whichever country, the earlier it moved on, the quicker it became prosperous. If you look at Korea, Singapore, other countries, which we did it in the early 70s, then China came in 80s. Turkey, India came in 90s, but unfortunately, and we have complete confusion even at this stage in our trade policy. Now we come up with, because India did this made in India, so we came up with made in Pakistan. Now India started, they were doing very well from 92 till about 2014. Their economy was growing, their exports were growing, their trade was growing, but then somebody suggested them, okay, now let's try to fix this and try to fix some, raise the tariffs, etc. And you see they started going down, their economy. But we are now trying to follow them. Now, recently I heard this, it was in the newspaper that the Commerce Minister said, we will not sign this information technology agreement because we want to promote industrialization. Not realizing that only those countries made progress in industrialization which became a part of this information technology, I should say, club. And Pakistan has been thinking for the last 20 years. Now, Samsung set up 5 manufacturing hubs in the world, only in those countries which are part of that. So we have this strange thing because we look at Trump, he has put some tariffs, so we say, okay, we start putting some tariffs. But unfortunately, we have to have this clarity. We did a lot of work on this FTA with Turkey, but now I think our big business council said, no, stop it. So we want to stay isolated. We are becoming more isolated instead of making progress. That's what I would say.
So I would like to move towards winding up the session. But before I do, I'd perhaps like to give a minute each to each of the panelists, starting with Dr. Salamat Ali. Sir, in lieu of all the discussion here today, what do you think are the most effective ways for Pakistan to move in the context of the debate today? Salamat Ali Saab, I'd like to kind of start with you.
Okay, thanks, Munib. I would like to point out two things, one on trade policy and one on trade facilitation. There has been a lot of discussion on smuggling. One thing which we have learned in the world that you can't stop smuggling even if you put all your border force or customs official on the borders. It has to be tackled through trade policy measures. So you need to cut your tariff, allow trade to flow, otherwise smuggling will be there. You can't control it. Secondly, coming to trade facilitation, so it's good we are putting single window, we are implementing TFA, but you trade what you produce. So you need to focus on behind the border measures, increase your production capacity to take benefit of the TFA and all these policy measures. Thanks, Munib.
Thank you, Dr. Salam Saab. Just before I move to Dr. Manzoor Saab and his suggestions, I do realize a lot of questions have been asked related to the IT industry and the services, especially by Maz. Unfortunately, the scope of this seminar was a bit too limited to ask these questions, but questioning is the piety of thinking, as Heidegger said. And I think this is a kind of very interesting topic to perhaps arrange in a month or two. So thank you very much for your contributions to all the questions, all the people that asked the questions, and I'm very sorry if we didn't have time to put all of them forward. With that, Sir Manzoor Saab, what would your summarized 1 minute action plan be moving forward?
1 minute. So my 1 minute is that this post-COVID world is changing. It has changed. We need to push digitization, no matter where it is, whether it's in trade facilitation or manufacturing or anywhere. We need to move on and not be stuck in what we were doing in 19. The short summary is that we should quickly move digitization, no matter whether it's in trade facilitation, whether it's in anything, certification or anything. We have to quickly move in that direction and not keep doing what we were doing in the 1980s. That's my summary.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I will revert back to some interesting people who would have suggestions related to that last point that you have after the end of this webinar. Moving to you, Ms. Faiza, what in lieu of the discussion here today, and of course you've raised a lot of very, very, very valid points with respect to the problems that exporters are facing. What would you recommend as an action plan?
Munib, thank you for giving this question to me. As a private stakeholder, representative private stakeholder, we have already urged government to at least include the feedback of private stakeholder while strategizing. This is the first and foremost suggestion. A lot of organizations like SDPI, Apache do prepare advocacy documents and submit to government, which is on the basis of private stakeholders' actual inputs. These documents, if taken into consideration, can really help government in strategizing across borders. Secondly, they really need to understand that in order to be a powerful country in the region, Pakistan needs to understand the dynamics in Afghanistan and needs to facilitate in its development so that Pakistan can tap benefits in a longer run. And if you ignore, because you can change a lot of things, but you cannot change your neighbors. Same is valid for Pakistan and same is valid for Afghanistan. So these two really need to work together because one is very good port route and another is very interesting land route. With Gwadar coming into play, a lot of dynamics would change very significantly. And with a futuristic approach, we really need to make sure that we tap this benefit. And with reference to today's session, which is on the trade facilitation via IT with internet support, I would really urge that, first of all, our bodies involved from the government side should update the system to a manner that private stakeholders do not feel intimidated with the systems. There should be certain capacity building programs that Pachi can do on behalf of them if they can, engage us. But the point is that it is very intimidating system. A lot of importers, you would find it that they do not do businesses directly in Pakistan. They hire clearing agents and they're highly depending on them. So they do not have their own passwords with them also, only because they're very, very scared of the system. So make the system easy and decrease the cost of doing business. Otherwise, we will reach the importance in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. I think those are very valid points, Ms. Faiza. Just before I move to Riyasab, I think perhaps me working for SMEDA and the National Business Development Program in the government, I understand there are a lot of problems that we do face when it comes to practicality of implementation. However, given the opinions and advice of the three other speakers, what would be the most concrete steps that after this webinar you'd like to start implementing?
Thank you, Monique. I think I must quote the words of the WHO director. It says this is not the last pandemic. The world may face more pandemics. I mean, it all depends on the preparedness, you know, how do you respond? One is the active response, the other is the passive response. I think we should be prepared ourselves to plan and put in place a mechanism who can decide immediately when such things come, because these things are not normal. The issues which come up during these days are not normal. They are beyond, you know, the regulatory framework or any other facilitative framework which we used to adopt. So my only suggestion would be, I think, to put in place a mechanism who could address immediately, or at least, I mean, as early as possible, you know, to address such issues which come up to. The decisions are, the time of taking the decision is very important in such things. If we don't take the decision on time, then I think that whole effort will be wasted, and that's my point.
Yes, as I said earlier, a delayed reaction is no reaction at all, essentially. Moving forward, I think one great piece of advice and the result of this webinar that I really do see is the fact that you know, I work for the government myself, but the SDPI, and Vakar in particular, has given me a lot of freedom to interact and hold this webinar as a private individual. And I think that these kind of Riyasab, I think you might agree, these kind of collaborations are very, very important. Where, you know, even though we are, I think it's I guess the idea is what kind of a hat you're wearing. And I guess maybe Ms. Faiza raised this point that webinars are a great idea. The fact that we all used to need to meet up in a specific city, in a specific hotel, dress up. We can just have these action-powered 1.5 hour, 2 hour discussions. And sir, me and you, specifically, we do have a lot of burden, and we should take the brunt of the blame for a lot of the problems that the private sector has. But I think this is a very novel approach where we can kind of sit and just for perhaps 1.5 hours and 2 hours, put on a different hat that kind of allows us to maybe just slightly take a less bureaucratic view of things. And I hope you would agree with me on that.
That's absolutely right. I mean, the one good thing about those webinars is also it's the right kind of mix which you create. The recipe should be correct. And once these seminars are over, you can have, you know, dispersed or disseminate them, relay them to at least an unlimited number of people. You know, that is the good thing about them. That those people who could not attend in time, they can always listen to it and get advantage of it. So it is, the outreach is very, very far. These webinars, once done, I think even after that also, that can be a source of learning for a lot of other people.
Yes, certainly. With that note, I would once again like to thank all the panelists for giving your time and sharing your valuable thoughts. I think at the start of this session, I said that perhaps my aim whenever at the planning stage of this was to kind of get a lecture from 4 experts within the context of Pakistan trade facilitation. And I think, at least I hope, that all the other participants and viewers would feel the same way. With that, thank you very much for your time to the panelists and the attendees. And inshallah, we will very soon be summarizing these arguments and putting them on paper to be published and sent to various government bodies. Thank you very much.